It's Thursday afternoon, 4 p.m. in Central Europe, and it's Space Café Israel time. Our Space Café Israel by Meidad Pariente with his guest Ram Levi will begin very soon. As always, we really appreciate your participation and ongoing feedback, and we will learn and improve based on your feedback. I am Elena Vocale, Event Coordinator at SpaceWatch.Global. SpaceWatch.Global is a Europe-based online platform for information in and about space and new space activities in a geopolitical context. I would like to thank all our private and corporate supporters that showed us their commitment to keep our independent journalism alive. We really appreciate that. If you want to be part of the supporter team, it's just a click away from you on our website. I know many of you are already familiar with it, with our website, our bi-weekly and daily newsletters, and the Space Café podcasts. The latest one features Kevin O'Connell, retiring director at the US Department of Commerce. And we also have new exciting episodes of Space Café Radio, the latest series of episodes with David Henry from Exotrails, and in German language from the ILA Glass Studio with our guests, Gunther Hesinger and as an astronaut Matthias Maurer. Don't miss them. Our fan shop is open for you on our website, and it's just the nicest way for you to become a space watcher. If you've missed any of our previous web talks, we have an archive on our webpage in the event section and of course on YouTube. We will also host our Space Café Israel live regularly. And with that, my job is done, and I'd like to hand over to your host today. Signor Pariente, over to you.
Grazie, Elena. Thank you very much. Welcome to Space Café Israel episode 7. My guest today is Mr. Ram Levi. Ram is the founder and CEO of Confidus, a cybersecurity and crisis management company. Ram is an award-winning cybersecurity expert, public speaker, and advisor to global organizations on cybersecurity, cyber crisis management, and national cyber policy. We're going to talk about cybersecurity for space missions, a trend or a necessity. Welcome, Ram.
Hi, Meidad. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon from lovely Tel Aviv.
You too.
As you probably already know, I always like to start with some icebreakers, and I always ask my guests, can they share something about themselves, something personal that cannot be found on their LinkedIn page? So what is your secret?
Well, I have one secret. I have many secrets, but I'll share one with you. When I was a major in the Israeli intelligence, I participated in a contest called the IDF Commanders Gourmet Cooking Contest, and I won first place.
Cooking contest?
Cooking contest, yeah.
Cooking contest.
Yeah, and I won first place. They promised the television channels that the winner would be on television, but since I was secret at the time, they could only show my shoulder. So there's a photo of myself holding my dish and only seeing the shoulder with my ranks in the newspapers. And that's pretty much the secret I'm sharing with you right now.
So you're actually a chef.
I wouldn't call myself a chef. I like to cook and I like to host. So if any of you are coming to Tel Aviv, I promise that I'll take you to good restaurants, and maybe I'll cook you a dinner, and then we'll go to a nice party in the fascinating night scene of Tel Aviv.
And what was the dish that gave you first prize?
Well, it was a Momo Gourmet. It's an Indian Nepalese dish. We made it with a few sauces and with the limitations of the IDF ingredients in the kitchen. It was the best that could be done. It was actually quite tasty. It was quite a tasteful dish, but it was almost 15 years ago.
So can you share the recipe with the audience so I can later on upload it?
Absolutely. How much will they pay me? I'm kidding. Yeah, of course. I'll share with pleasure. Yeah, I'll do that.
Thanks. Let's talk about your career. You started, as long as I remember, you were there with cybersecurity, and you started way back when cybersecurity was more science fiction than actual thing. Why did you choose to pursue this path?
Well, I would say that the past chose me. It was kind of an evolution rather than a revolution in terms of my professional career. I served in the Israeli intelligence, where we did a lot of stuff regarding information security and information operations. When I retired from the military, I approached back then he was the chairman of the Israeli Space Agency, with a partner of mine who we worked together in the IDF. And we told them, look, there's almost no research in Hebrew concerning space security. We understand computers, we understand cyber. We did do a little bit of work regarding space security in the intelligence. And we wanted to create more literature, academic literature around space security. So that led me to work as a research fellow at the Tel Aviv University. And then, I was in the right place in the right time. That year, the president of Israel asked my professor to write the Israeli space policy. So you know what professors do, they call their students. And I was the student that actually was writing with my colleague, now Professor Ganit Paikovsky. I'm sure everybody knows her. And if she hasn't participated in Space Cafe, you should invite her.
Sure.
So we wrote together the Israeli space policy. It was approved by the president, and that led to huge funding of many space programs in Israel. And then a year later, the prime minister called him and asked him to look into some recommendations that were coming from the intelligence regarding their necessity in cybersecurity. And when we left the meeting, he told me, look, I cannot recommend without a national committee. That was the evening where he decided that we need a national committee. He appointed me to be the secretary of that committee, and that committee was responsible for creating Israel's cybersecurity policy. We passed Government Resolution 3611, which established the National Cybersecurity Directorate in the Prime Minister's office back in 2011. And then I moved to the Israeli National Committee for Cybersecurity Research and Development, where we formulated the Israeli grand challenges in cybersecurity. So it was kind of, one thing led to another, and then I decided that it's time to open my own business, and I started Confides, which is a cybersecurity consulting company. I joined later the International Union of Aerospace Insurers. It's the union of all the insurers and reinsurers that insure everything that flies and is being launched. And I'm their cybersecurity advisor, because we are dealing with cyber aspects of aerospace. And about 2 years ago, we started a new company with the Israeli shipping company focused on cybersecurity and logistics, maritime and logistics around the world. So we work with ports and terminals in the US, huge logistic companies in Europe, in Singapore, and all over the world.
And how do you see the connection between your two passions? Because you're here, and I know you're passionate about space. How do you see the connection between space and cybersecurity in past years and today?
Well, I forgot to mention that I'm also an alumni of the International Space University.
Of course.
Yeah, well, space is a passion. I think it's passion for almost as soon as you start talking to someone about space, you see their eyes kind of opening up because it's amazing and it's interesting and it's kind of mind blowing. But the connection is very simple. Everything that is controlled by computers can be hacked, manipulated, and be used for things other than what it was originally planned for. So this is the connection. So if we want to safeguard those assets that we put in space, the services that we use with those assets in space, we need cybersecurity.
Good point. Some might think that cyber threats to space assets are more science fiction than science fact. Can you share some use cases of cyber attacks on space assets?
Well, I must say that not only it's not science fiction, there are actually quite a few interesting events that happened over the last 30 years. Interestingly enough, one of the first events that happened in regarding to space was actually in 1989. In 1989, everybody knows Julian Assange, right, from WikiLeaks. So Julian Assange were living back then in Australia, in Melbourne, Australia, and his mother, she was a kind of a Greenpeace freedom fighter. Everybody was scared, you know, back at the time. It was a few years after the Challenger explosion. NASA was supposed to launch a satellite into space with a nuclear engine. Now, they were afraid that if there would be another explosion over Florida, that will create a huge nuclear disaster. So they were protesting in front of the US Embassy in Australia. And he told her, there's a movie on it, it's called Underground. And he told her, look, your protests are just doing nothing. Let me do the job. And he was a hacker, and he hacked into the NASA headquarters, and he used a computer virus called WANK, Worms Against Nuclear Killers, WANK, which destroyed the ground control computers of NASA. And he actually caused a delay in the launch. The satellite was launched a few months later, but there was a delay in the launch. So this is, I think it's the first known attack against a space asset, and it was in 1989. And since then, we saw actually quite a few attacks. Most of them, by the way, are not against the satellite itself, but the service of the satellite. For example, Iran was trying to attack satellite communications and TV broadcasting of BBC. In the recent war between Russia and Ukraine, the day that the war broke out, Russia attacked Viasat, and they caused a disruption of tens of thousands, I think about 40,000 terminals of Viasat. Those terminals were used in Ukraine for communication of the military and the police, but not only. They were used to command and control turbines in Germany. They were used for communication in Poland, in France. And it was one of the first signals that the war is about to break, because when you start a war, you want to create a strategic surprise. And one of the elements of surprise is disrupting the communication of the enemy, so they cannot coordinate well enough, so you can surprise them and bring the surprise to a maximum. So that was a very good indication that the war is about to break. But there are also other events. In 2007 and 2008, China allegedly broke into ground stations of two satellites that were controlled in Spitsbergen in Norway. They actually managed to gain control of the satellites and send transmissions to the satellites. They didn't take over the satellites, but they could, according to the reports that we saw a couple of years after that. And another interesting event, which Meidad, you and I discussed it a few times, was the attack, or the alleged attack, against the satellite called Rosat, the Röntgen satellite. It was a joint satellite between Germany, UK, and I think the US. And nobody really knows, but there's one theory that someone took over the command and control of the satellite and changed the direction of the satellites toward the sun and burned the filters. That was in 2000 and something, 1998, excuse me, 1998. So there are events, but I must say that most attacks that we know of are actually attacks for the purpose of intelligence, because ground stations are a very good hub for communications. So if you gain control of the ground station, you actually gain control of a lot of communication, and sometimes it's not encrypted. So it's a very good source for intelligence agencies. And if you remember, a few years ago, there was this huge leak of what the US is doing, the NSA is doing. And in one of the leaks, they actually saw that the NSA and the GCHQ hacked the ground station in Germany, and they had full mapping of the ground station, including IPs, administrative passwords, and they used it for intelligence. And when they showed the technicians in the ground station how deep they were in the ground station, they were shocked because they knew about the ground station more than the people who operated it. So those things happen all the time. It's not science fiction. It's actually, it's a reality. It's a sad reality, and we should do something about it.
So that leads me to my next question. You were one of the first people in Israel to connect the dots between space and cybersecurity. Do you feel a wind of change in the approach of the space industry regarding cyber threats?
Well, there is a wind of change. It's not a hurricane. It's a nice wind, you know, that you're on the beach, and it's a breeze. It's a 50 knots breeze, not a breeze, not more than that. I think the awareness is there, but I think most companies are not doing enough. They're just simply not doing enough. And when I say enough, I mean the basic stuff. And the basic stuff are, you know, cyber hygiene, proper password, two-factor authentication, putting endpoint protection on your computers, making sure that your databases are encrypted, making sure that you have, you know, the right privileges and the right privileges for the people who are using the systems. You know, the basic stuff. I'm not even talking about, you know, dealing with nation-state attacks. Just the basic stuff. It's still not there. Well, not good. Not. I would say not in the way that we would expect in 2023.
So, do you feel that most of the attacks in the industry are kind of a silent attack? So hackers just sit and have access to information without actually taking a satellite over or performing a hostile takeover like we see in the James Bond movies?
If I had to guess, then my guess would be I don't know. Okay, that would be, I would say, my guess is as good as yours, but my guess would be yes, and I'll tell you why. First, we have to keep in mind that most cyber attacks are for financial purposes. It's hackers in China, in Russia, in Brazil, in Israel, whatever, wherever you want, that are hacking other companies for the purpose of money. So they would attack hospitals, and they would attack. There are actually 4 attacks against hospitals around the world every week since COVID-19. That's an unimaginable numbers. I mean, hackers are attacking hospitals for ransom. They're attacking schools. They're attacking industries. It's just a question of time until they will attack a satellite company. So it's for the purpose of money. Now, they're going for the easy targets, or the targets that they assume that they would pay because their operational downtime would cost them more than paying the ransom. It's basic mathematics, okay? That's how they choose their viable targets. So we hear about when do we hear about those attacks? Either when the victims, they do not want to pay. So the way it works is that the ransomware hackers, they hack into the company, they steal the data, then they encrypt the network, and then they ask you for ransom. If you don't pay, they will leak the data that they have, and they will publish it on the dark web. That's how we know who was hacked and who didn't want to pay. So we have the numbers. Another way to know is to follow the money. We see who's paying. We don't know who, but we see who's paying. So and then we can deduce by the number of leaks and the number of transactions how many attacks, successful attacks happened. Another way is that the service doesn't function. So, for example, if there's a TV station that is using geostationary satellites to broadcast their television, and all of a sudden the screens go black, that means that the service has been hit. It's a disruptive attack. And then you know that the attack happened because the service doesn't work anymore. Same goes, by the way, when hackers are not doing it for the purpose of money because they only want to disrupt the service. So they would go into the network like what Julian Assange did in 1999. Hackers are still doing it today. It's called disruptive attack. They just go into the network and they delete everything that they can. Now, that's based on the theory that I wrote about in my thesis. I wrote about a thesis about cyber attack of space systems. And the idea was very simple. Every system is a system of systems, just like a space system.
Yeah.
Now, in the past, before cyber, if you wanted to bring down a space system or a space network, you could hit the satellite, you could jam the uplink or the downlink, or you could use kinetic attacks, meaning missiles against the ground station. You can bring the ground station down, you could burn it. But from a cyber perspective, you don't need to do it anymore. Because if you attack the satellite itself, you are risking a strategic response because it's a strategic asset. And it's also a risk to other nations. That's why it's not a favorable approach. Countries do not like to attack space assets because of the replications of that action. So now they have an alternative. Instead of attacking the space asset itself and risking the response of the attack, they could bring down the ground stations or the elements that the ground station is built of. In other words, if there are 100 computers in the ground station, and that's what the theory says, if I bring down only 50% of them, there's a 100% chance that the entire system will collapse. And by saying entire system will collapse, I mean the entire space service will collapse. So that opens up a new possibility of negating a space service without attacking the space asset itself. That's why it's so dangerous. And if you add to that the fact that most ground stations and most space companies are actually young because of the new space. They're young, they're startups. Startups don't have a lot of money. They're very focused on their, on their MVP path. They want to be quick into the market. They have to be, and they don't have a lot of regulation because regulation is one of the biggest drivers to invest in cybersecurity because cybersecurity is an expense. So if they're not regulated or it's not required by, let's say you're working for the DoD. So if the DoD doesn't tell you to put cybersecurity, then it just goes down the list, down the priority list. You understand that it's important, but you would invest last in it, or it wouldn't be your first choice. And then it becomes very difficult, because if you haven't designed the system with security in mind and privacy in mind, doing security and privacy at a later stage becomes a very, very expensive and a very challenging engineering task. That's the problem with it. So we need to address it when the companies are young.
Okay, understood. It brings a lot of questions to mind, so I'll try to focus on a few. First of all, you talked about new space, and new space enjoys a lot of the progress. So I myself enjoy a Slack channel with my satellites. I can use my mobile device to see telemetry. I can use my mobile device to see anomalies and even access the satellites themselves. Can you give me a tip how or what indications should I pay attention to that may indicate that my mobile was hacked?
Well, my first tip would be do not do it. Don't
but
do
it's
it
so
like
convenient.
It is convenient, yeah, but don't do it. Don't do it. No, we want convenience in life. I understand that. Well, when it comes to mobile phone, it's more first. It's more difficult to attack mobile phones, but then it's more difficult to know that something has happened. But if there are two tips I could give you, is first to install some kind of a mobile device protection, like Checkpoint Harmony or Malwarebytes. There's some good mobile device protection, but they're not as good as antiviruses or endpoint detection and response software that we have on PCs, because mobile phones operate differently. But I will look for signs like your battery is draining very fast, because someone is using the processor without you knowing. So battery changes, it drains very fast. If the phone is doing things that it wasn't supposed to do. If someone gave commands to the satellites that you did not give, then someone took over your phone. But I would also look at indications from other places. For example, if someone would try to hack your phone, one way would be to directly hack your phone, but another way would be to hack the cloud services that you're using on your phone. For example, they would hack your Gmail, or if you're using iPhone, they would hack your iCloud, and from that, they would have access to your phone. So I would look for indication on those accounts as well. And here's another thing. If you are communicating with the satellite on Slack, I don't need to attack your phone. All I need to do is attack your Slack. So that's another issue. Now it's not an issue of only protecting the phone. You need to protect the services that the phone is using or you're using in your phone. So going back, for example, to Gmail, I would use two-factor authentication with a physical two-factor, like a key, because that brings the problem into the physical dimension. If someone wants to attack your computer or your Gmail account, they now need to have access to the physical key that you have in your keychain. That's not as simple as just stealing your one-time password that will come from SMS. That's a different problem. So, and it makes the problem more complex. And I would apply that to all the critical services that you use: Slack, Gmail, your iCloud, everything that's critical to you. Apply two-factor authentication with a physical key. That would be, and by the way, there's a research that Microsoft did a couple of years ago that showed that using two-factor authentication brings down the likelihood of successful phishing attacks, which result in hijacking of accounts, by 99.99999%.
Wow.
So it's a huge difference. That's the first thing I would do, because that's what hackers want. They want access to your computer by stealing your username and password. And then they would escalate their privileges and do whatever they want. So you need to make their life hard.
Great. That's some very good pointers that I'm sure everybody is going to implement. I know that I'm going to implement. Speaking about new space again, and architecture and progress. In the past, space assets were kind of old machines using VAX, VMS, sometimes even ADA languages or all kind of obsolete languages, computer languages. And today we have Starlink. They use Linux. They have like 60 Linux processors on each and every satellite. And Starlink terminal is an actual access point to the internet. Do you see this progress in the space to ground and ground to space communication, which is today based on Linux and IP type of communication, as a sort of a open door or a vulnerability?
Well, simply put, with every progress, there are new vulnerabilities. It's a very, very simple equation. So the answer is absolutely yes. Because once we start using IP infrastructure, which is very good, by the way, we're now opening ourselves up to IP infrastructure attacks, denial of service attacks, routing attacks, DNS attacks, vulnerability, using vulnerabilities to take over devices. There are new possibilities. But what the other side needs to do is to apply mechanisms to reduce the risks from those attacks, which we have, by the way. We have different types of firewalls. We have web application firewalls. We have We have best practices for how we harden different types of operating systems. We know that patch management is critical when it comes to protecting every digital asset, because a vulnerability is a bug in a software that can be used for an attack. So we know that patch management is something that can reduce the attack surface. We have mechanisms for reducing the attack surface by closing down, the surface that can be used for an attack. We know how to find anomalies in networks. There are many things, there are many best practices that we already know from almost 20 or 30 years of experience that can be applied to reduce the risks of attacks from those infrastructures.
But can you see how somebody can pay $500, get a Starlink terminal, which has its own IP address, and it's part of the Starlink network, and now this person have two-way communication with the network and have direct access to the entire Starlink network? Do you think that this is something that cannot be rolled back, and this is the future of communication network architectures, and we just need to deal with it?
Well, if this is how they decided to plan the architecture, then our job is not to tell them that what they did is wrong. Our job is to tell them, look, go ahead, we'll help you protect it. But if the question is, can we attack the infrastructure? Just go back 1 year ago, exactly 1 year ago. That's pretty much what happened to Viasat. Someone took over the ground station, responsible for the updates of the terminals, and disrupted the update of the hardware. So it's doable. It's possible. Now, how can it be done with Starlink? I don't know. I've never investigated the Starlink architecture, but I'm pretty sure that if you put a good team of pen testers, they would probably figure out how to do it in a couple of weeks. Everything can be hacked. It's just a question of time, resources, and knowledge.
Let's talk about new space small companies. You mentioned small companies and their priorities. How can small organizations can protect themselves from cybersecurity attacks and dealing with it without paying an arm and a leg?
This is a problem that we see not only in space, but in general. Small companies, small to medium business. By the way, small to medium businesses are the main target of hackers. Why? Because they're an easy target. Most of them are not secured. Most of them don't even understand. They don't even realize the risk that they're in. We do a lot of crisis management. So when we come to companies that were hacked, one of the first questions I get from the CEO is, I don't understand why they hacked me. They could have hacked anyone else. So my answer would be, because you're an easy target. It's pretty straightforward. But for small businesses, even for space-related small businesses, I would probably do a few things. The first thing is what I called before cyber hygiene. Cyber hygiene is like cleaning your house. You clean your house every week. You don't clean your house once a week. So you have to do cybersecurity once a week. And that means you have to do patch management, meaning making sure that all the softwares are up to date. Software that are not up to date are holes into your company. It's very simple. Second thing, I would make sure that people have the right permissions. Don't give permissions to the people who don't need them. So you need to make, make sure that you gave the right permissions to the right people, and conduct like a permission survey every quarter. Make sure that you have two-factor authentication. I explained before, that's critical. Reduce the attack surface by making sure that everything that's exposed to the internet, you're only exposing what you need. Put it behind the firewall if you need. Make sure that the firewall is properly configured. And last but not least, use some kind of a security software, like an antivirus, or an EDR, or an XDR, or an MDR, whichever acronym you want to choose. Install it properly and make sure that someone is looking at the alerts. The problem that we see is that many small companies are actually buying very good products, but they don't know how to work with them. Meaning, they have a very good antivirus software. The software will alert at 5 a.m. that there's a ransomware attack, but nobody sees the alert. It's like having an alarm in your house and nobody sees the alarm when it goes on. So what's the point of putting an alarm in your house or in your car? Same thing goes for cybersecurity. You need to make sure that someone is responsible for it. Someone is looking at the alerts. Someone understands what the alert means, and then you, based on their understanding of the alert, they make the proper action.
So
that's what I would start with. And by the way, it's not expensive. It's just a question of the right mindset, that it's important and you need to do it.
you mentioned a lot of things that they all make sense, but it's kind of tedious, and sometimes I don't have the time or the energy to go and check all the software packages installed on my laptop, and to see when and where I need to update and so on. Can I hire somebody to do that for me?
Well, first you can hire companies like us. That's what we do. We help small businesses do exactly that. And we actually have quite a lot of space clients. Space Israel is our client. Spacecom is our client. You are my client. Effective Space. We have a lot of space companies because they understood exactly what you're saying. I'm not doing a commercial for myself, but I'm just saying that managed service is a very good solution for the problem. By the way, another option would be to use the automatic features of many of the softwares. For example, you could do automatic patch management with a software that does automatic patch management. And all you have to do is you need to define the patch management policy once, and then you enforce the policy with the agent that sits on your computer. You can download an antivirus and turn the proactive defense on. So if something happens, they don't just give you the alert, they stop the process. Sometimes they would stop the computer. Now, if it's a critical process, it's a risk, and maybe you don't want to do it. But if it's just a personal computer, then maybe it's a price you're willing to pay. So you have two options. Either you use the right software, and if people want recommendations, I would be happy to do that. And you use the proper guidelines. For example, the NIST cybersecurity framework for small businesses is a very good guidelines for small businesses. Or you just, you pick up the phone and you call a managed service that is close to your house that you trust, and you do cybersecurity as an outsourcing, just like you do finance and marketing and DevOps and market, or I don't know, you build your website with an outside company. So you do cybersecurity with an outside company. I don't think it's a privilege, and it's not a privilege anymore to do cybersecurity. It's a business necessity. And by the way, very soon it's going to be a legal requirement in Europe because of the new NIS2 regulation. So telecommunication and space companies will be required to do cybersecurity. In Israel, it's going to become part of the license if you're doing telecommunications. If you're working with governments, the governments will require you to do that. So it's indirect regulation. So it's no longer a necessity. So if you're small, I would start small, because if you build cybersecurity as part of building the organizational culture, it's much easier and it's by far much cheaper.
Let's talk about responses. Let's say that something happened and I realized that I was attacked or somebody hacked me. What are the possible responses, and do some such external services that you mentioned can also take care of the response for me?
Absolutely. First, you call the malware busters, the people who come and they bust the malware. No, but it's no joke. First, I got to say that a cyber crisis is a real crisis. It's a crisis that takes between at least 10 to 14 days. It's very long. During that time, many companies, they simply do not work. And there are examples all over the planet that you can look at. Companies, when they're being hit by cyber attack, they don't work for at least a couple of days. It's not pleasant. I would say, though, on the other hand, I wouldn't scare you that much, because people say that companies can collapse and they can, you can lose the business. That rarely happens. Okay, it's not a pleasure crisis to be in. Yeah, the outcome will be that you will be better in terms of cybersecurity, but you will not lose the company. Yeah, more likely than not. Now, in terms of crisis management, when we go into a company that experienced a crisis, there are a few things we are trying to do. The first thing, we need to analyze very quickly who we're dealing with. Who are the hackers? Which type of malwares they're using? How they got into the network, what we call the attack vector. How they moved in the network, what we call the lateral movement. What they did in the network, which information they took, in which computers or servers they're at, because what we want to do is we want to contain the attack. Then we need to devise some kind of a response strategy. The response strategy depends very much on who's the adversary. For example, in Israel, if we analyze that the attackers are demanding ransom, but they're actually Iranian, then it's fake ransomware. They will not bring us the encryption key, even if we pay them. And it's illegal in Israel to pay a group that is in an enemy country. By the way, it's also illegal in the US if the attack group is under sanctions. So you need to be able to know who are the attackers, because you want to devise some kind of a response strategy. Then that's what we need: intelligence, and we need forensics investigation. And the forensics investigation takes a couple of days, because there's a lot of data to analyze, and you need very, very skilled people that know how to do proper forensics investigation. The second thing is we need to work with regulators. We need to notify, if sometimes we have notification requirements, either by the laws, local laws like privacy laws or GDPR or NIS, or we have contractual requirements. For example, if your satellites are providing service for the DoD, you probably have to notify the DoD if you have experienced a breach. So you have to notify. So there's a lot of legal work, which is a burden, but we have to do it. Then there's the PR effort. We need to make sure that we are keeping the reputation of the company good, in a good light. If it's an interesting company, then there's going to be a lot of media attention. So we need to know what we're saying to the journalists, the bloggers, the reporters, and we need to be able to sync the messages, not only outside, but also internally, because you need to tell the employees what's going on. And if you tell the employees what's going on, it's probably going to leak to the media. But you have to tell the employees what's going on, because if they don't know what's going on, they can go into a state of stress, because it's a very stressful situation. Sometimes we go into companies and the employees tell us, look, am I going to lose my job? Is the company going to be out of business in 1 week? And we have to calm them down and tell them, look, everything is going to be okay. So you have to tell them something. But the biggest effort, and we also work with the insurance companies if there's a cyber insurance policy, and then we have to work with the finance to understand the financial implications of the event. But the biggest issue is reconstructing the IT systems or the OT systems that were damaged by the attack. That's something that most people do not take into account. Sometimes you have to reinstall the entire environment. And if we're talking about an environment of, 500 computers and 100 servers that you have to reinstall from backup, it can take you a lot of time and it costs a lot of money. And in a period of about 1 week, you reinstall systems that took you years to build. And then you have to make sure that it all works and functions properly, and put on top of that a layer of security that wasn't really there before. And you have to do all that in, let's say, 7 or 8 days, because the company wants to go back to business. That's a huge effort. That's why when we do crisis management, the first thing that we tell the CEOs is that, look, it's going to take about 2 weeks. It's a very long recovery process. And even when we're done, you're going to have months of what we say the long tail of recovery after the crisis, because you will have class actions and things will not work, and you will need new employees, and you will have issues with clients because you did not provide the service. You know, there are issues that sometimes we cannot foresee. So
yeah, backlashes.
Yeah.
Okay, last question for me. I want to take you 30 years to the future. The year is 2050. Can you openly and freely describe how do you see the space industry in Israel? What will be the major vectors, strong points, how Israel will interact with other nations regarding the space efforts, where we're going to shine?
It's a good question.
Thank you.
When I say good, I mean it's a very difficult question. Israel usually shines in areas that are strongly connected to what we need in terms of security. If there is a very strong security need, that's where Israel will shine. That's why we have very good technological sector. We have very good high tech because it's very connected to the defense establishment. So I would say, and because you need a lot of money for space, it's not 3 people sitting in a garage developing a cloud application. You need a lot of money, and big money comes usually from governments. And I would say that in 30 years from now, space will be weaponized. We will see weapons deployed in space to assist in war fighting on planet Earth. We will probably see very impressive ways of negating space abilities in space, but also doing what effective space is doing. They're not called effective space anymore, right?
Yeah, Astroscale Israel.
Astroscale Israel, yes. Doing maintenance in space. But what I would like to see, and by the way, I wouldn't like to see any of that, because I think it will be very bad for humanity. It's one step before our extinction, so it's not a good sign. I would like to see more people in space, actually, more space tourism, more people going into the moon, more people on their way to Mars and other planets in the solar system. I would like to see people leave the solar system, which I don't know how we're going to do with the current capabilities that we have, but that's what I would like to see in 30 years from now.
So are you planning to have a special section in your company that will deal with the security of space hotels?
I want to have a space hotel myself.
Oh, okay. Nice.
I want to go with my son, spend a weekend in a space hotel on the moon.
Yeah, I promised my daughter that when she will be 30, I will take her to a vacation in a space hotel. She will be 30 in 7 years. So
wow,
not a lot of time.
Can I be your son? And you can take me as well.
We can discuss it offline later on.
I'll be responsible for the music and the alcohol, and you'll be responsible for the rest.
Okay. Okay, that sounds like an interesting deal. So now let's open the floor for questions from the audience. Elena, can you be so kind and read us some questions?
Of course. So the first one from Chris says, hacking human life support systems on the moon or in space could be deadly without using a kinetic weapon. How do we make sure this doesn't happen if we can?
Well, I would tell Chris that hacking human life support systems on planet Earth can be deadly. And we're actually dealing with the same problems in hospitals right now. What I would say, simply put, I would not connect them to anything. I would make sure that everything that is directly related to life support should be either the communication should be unidirectional, like we do in critical infrastructure. Everything that is, at least in Israel, what is considered to be critical, all the operational technology that is considered critical has a unidirectional communication, meaning you can only send commands in one way, and you can receive the telemetry in another way. So I would send a telemetry, but I would not allow remote commands of human of life support systems. That's what I would do. It's too risky.
So prevention by making it a one-way communication, only transmission with no reception.
Only transmission of telemetry, but not allowing the command and control from remote.
Okay.
Unless we can be almost 100% sure that we can constantly monitor the traffic to make sure that only the allowed traffic is going in. Which brings us, by the way, to the most fundamental question of cybersecurity, which we haven't been able to solve yet, because there's an issue. We want anonymity, which, by the way, doesn't really exist in the internet anymore, but still we feel that there is anonymity, but there isn't. How do we know that someone is someone who is claiming to be online? Once we solve that, once you know that I am the one who gave the command, or Meidad is the one that gave the command, we can pretty much eliminate most of the attacks right now. Because what hackers are doing, they will take over your computer, Meidad, and then they would send Torsten the virus, and he trusts you. So they would use the trust that you and Torsten have in order to deploy the malware. So if we can solve this fundamental issue, by the way, this is a real grand challenge. If we can solve this fundamental issue of how we command and control, and we know who's behind the communication, then we can have trust in putting not only life support system, but other systems online.
By the way, my superpower is that I'm trustworthy. So that's a different thing.
Exactly.
Do you think that quantum key distribution might solve this issue of knowing that somebody is somebody and knowing that someone is listening?
Well, first, it will create other issues with the current encryption that we have. But the problem is not the type of encryption. The problem is that we need to have mechanisms that can verify that the person behind the computer system is who he claims to be. So it's not a matter of how we do the communication, how we do the encryption. It's a matter of how do you know that I am the person who I'm saying I am when you don't see me. Let's say we're chatting online, you're chatting with me on WhatsApp. You don't actually know that I'm who I am.
Unless I have this kind of secret question that only you know the answer to.
Yeah, which, by the way, you know, people are, we will always find a person who's stupid enough to give up the answer to this question. So we need to find a way, just like we humans have. You know that I'm me because we met and we know each other. So we are constantly verifying each other. So if I would stand up and someone would sit here instead of me, you would know that immediately. But if we would to turn off the camera and I would stand up and someone would be sitting in front of me and would continue to chat with you, you probably wouldn't notice. And now we have AI doing that. So they can also learn the way that you communicate and almost, you know, make a real fake chatting and now almost real fake deep fakes of how I speak and how I look, which means that we will not be able to verify who we're communicating with. That's a fundamental issue we need to solve. We need to make sure that every packet online comes from a very verifiable source. Once we know that, we will eliminate the numbers of attacks to almost zero because you will not be able to do that anymore.
Interesting. Elena, another question?
Yeah, sure. So I'm rephrasing here, but Jan Nicolas asks, how is cybersecurity in space different from cybersecurity on Earth?
Simply put, it's not. It's only the risk of the consequences of attacking a space assets that are different in space. If you attack, I don't know, a telecommunications company on space, then okay, you know, they'll have a downtime. The damage there will be a financial damage, but that's pretty much it. But if you take a satellite out of control because of a cyber attack, that's a different issue. That's what I was saying in the beginning. So fundamentally saying it's not different at all. You're absolutely right. The impact could be different.
Okay, thank you. And another question from Chris, can Israel cooperate with NATO on joint space and cyber issues?
I don't see any reason why not.
Okay. Is a two-factor authentication where one of the factor is a mobile phone app and the other a password on the computer enough?
It's enough depends on which threat you're dealing with, because if it's a sophisticated threat, what they will do is they will hack your phone and steal your two-factor from there. So it's a question of risk management. For most people and for most scenarios, it's more than enough, and I would go with convenience on that. It's much better than not having two-factor authentication. If you have to deal with sophisticated hackers, what we call APTs, advanced persistent threat, I wouldn't use a mobile phone as a second factor. I would use a physical key. We use physical key in my company. It's very simple. You just plug it into the computer, you press it, and you're in.
Okay, so the follow-up question to that is, what does a physical key look like? An RFID tag or a synchronized code generator?
No, physical keys, there are many types of physical keys, but I'll show you. That's my physical key. You see, you plug it into your USB, you press it, and that's it. You're in. So
you can purchase this online?
Yeah, you can purchase it online. It's called there's actually a consortium called FIDO. You can go online. Google is part of it. I mean, all the big companies are part of it. Yeah, it's called YubiKey. There are different types of YubiKeys. The YubiKeys that are using NFC, so you can use it with your mobile phone. And that's it. It's very simple. It costs about $50, and it saves most of your security issues. It's the cheapest and probably the best security decision that you can make. And if you're afraid of losing it, you don't. When was the last time you lost your car key? That's the answer to the question. If you will lose your physical, you don't lose physical keys. You put it with your car key and you never lose it. And if you lose it, you have another one.
I actually use my phone as my car key, so that's not a good example.
Yeah.
Thank you. So Chris asks, who are the strongest and most challenging space and cyber hackers? China, North Korea, Russia, Iran, the US?
Iran, no. We've been dealing with Iranian attacks in Israel. I'm surprised by how not sophisticated most of their attacks are. I would expect them to do much better, but for some reason, which I don't know to explain, they're not very sophisticated. For most part, there are some sophisticated attacks. I would say China for sure. There is no doubt about it. And we've seen Chinese attacks in the past. And when I say China, I mean government of China, yeah?
Everything
US,
in China is the government of China. So
No. There are hackers in China. Not everything is government. But what I'm saying government agencies, yeah? US NSA, GCHQ, Germany, Israel.
And adding to this question, what about private groups?
I haven't seen many private groups attack Russia. Of course, I forgot Russia. Russia is, I would say, before the war, we would say that Russia is number one. After the war with Ukraine, I'm not sure that Russia is as good as we thought. I haven't seen many private groups attacking space assets for the sake of attacking space assets. They would attack space assets for ransom, for money. So I wouldn't know. North Korea, by the way, they're very good. But most of their attacks now are aimed towards stealing money from crypto companies to bypass the sanctions imposed by the West and finance their nuclear program. Just yesterday, the FBI, this week, don't catch me, don't catch my word, attributed an attack to North Korea, to a North Korean group called Lazarus. They stole $100 million from a crypto company. That happens on a regular basis. We dealt with a few North Korean attacks in my company this year. They're sophisticated. They're very good.
Maybe we have time for one last question. Daniel asks, quantum computing breakthroughs and the influence on space and cyber.
Yeah, we need a whole session for that.
Okay.
I think, but simply put, I think quantum computing will reshuffle everything we know about security. And the first thing would be that it will make most of the encryption that we use right now obsolete, if not all. And we will really need to rethink how we do security in this new reality. But it's a very, very complicated issue that we need to devote time for.
And I guess because the other question was about generative AI. So I guess maybe this is a similar topic.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah. In terms of what?
In terms of space and security and the role of generative cybersecurity,
AI.
of course. Yeah.
Well, we are seeing now that that hackers are using AI to craft phishing emails that look very good, to write code, to penetrate into companies, to quickly adapt code that will speed up the way that they're attacking. It's a question of speed. A lot of the things are a question of speed. We see people using AI, again, for deep fake attacks. Sometimes, for example, if I want to conduct a very good phishing attack, then I would use my dad's voice to call Thorsten and ask him for something that will be used as part of a phishing campaign. It's being done right now, by the way. It's being done. And it's becoming an issue because we haven't taught the people how to distinguish between human and human-generated AI interactions. And we need to do that.
Interesting point. And it's a full session, I agree.
Well, maybe a week. We can do a week in Israel and talk about all the interesting stuff. And go partying, Meidad.
Challenge accepted, Ram. Let's do something about it.
But I want Thorsten to come.
And Elena.
And Elena, yeah.
Okay. I think we are about to run up. I think we're running out of time. So,
yes. So let me just sum up. Ram, thank you very much. It was as interesting as I expected, and time really flew by. So I appreciate your weekend and time and effort participating. And I'm happy to say that my next guest on the Space Café Israel next episode will be on February 22nd, and it will be Alice Miller.
Wow.
And talk with Alice about turning lab-scale technology into full-blown industry on the lunar surface. So make sure to register for the next episode.
Are we talking about Alice Miller that was fighting?
The Alice Miller, yes.
So you need to say who Alice Miller is. Wow, she's a celebrity in Israel.
Yep.
She paved the way for female pilots in the Israeli Air Force. She is a phenomenal person. Wow.
Can't
So
wait to
that's a wrap.
meet her. Thank you. And before we say goodbye, let me remind you of our upcoming events. So on the 26th of January, so today, later today at 8 p.m., we're going to have our space bar, the 60th Space Bar by Astro Agency. Tomorrow, the 27th of January at 6 p.m., join us for a Space Café Canada by Dr. Jessica West in conversation with Brian Galan on the Canadian space innovation. And on the 31st of January at 4 p.m., we have another episode of our Space Café 33 Minutes with Markus Fritz about space and mobility. And on the 1st of February at 4 p.m., join us for the second episode of our Space Café Black Ops by Dr. Emma Gatti in conversation with Dr. Namrata Goswami. And on the 2nd of February at 6 p.m., join us for a Space Café Italy by Dr. Emma Gatti. Again, don't miss this. It's going to be in Italian, I have to say. So all events are going to be online on Eventbrite, as always, and we would love to hear your feedback. So please check in with us on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and don't forget to sign up for our daily and our bi-weekly newsletters. And if you'd like to treat yourselves with something special, become a Space Watcher today or help us in the supporter program and get one of those amazing t-shirts as Meidad is showing. Thank you all very much for your interest today. Toda Rabba, thank you Meidad for hosting this inspiring talk, and thanks again to Ram for joining us, and to the entire team behind the scenes for doing that great job week by week again. Thank you, our audience, for attending this session. I hope you will all stay safe and healthy. I hope to see you in the next weeks in upcoming events. In the meantime, visit our website and follow us on social media. And don't forget, become a Space Watcher. Bye.